Buddy. I can't see you out there, but I trust there's a bunch of you online. I think we said near 30 or so had checked in. So great to see a large group and looking forward to our discussion tonight. My name is Jeff Schnabel. And oops, this isn't actually. There we go. So appreciate you joining us this evening to talk a little bit about Philbrook Farms Tract D at a virtual open house. So this is the stormwater facility and recreation area, or one of them, serving Philbrook Farms. So we'll start out with a couple of little housekeeping items, and then we'll jump into the presentation. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us at this virtual open house. A couple things for you to know. One, the meeting is being recorded. Virtual guests will remain muted during the presentation period, and then questions and comments will be held until the question and answer portion of the event, which will follow. Virtual guests can use the chat tool to put their questions in the chat, or you may use your raise hand icon, request to be unmuted. So there's 4 of us here in the room down at the county to talk with you today. Again, my name is Jeff Schnabel. I'm the Stormwater Infrastructure Manager for Public Works Clean Water Division. I'm joined here by Devin Rostifer, who is our Clean Water Division Manager, and also Kaylee McLaughlin-Burton and Haley Shannon, who are with our Community Engagement and Inclusion team. And so right up front, my huge thanks to both Kaylee and Haley for all of their help behind the scenes to make these events happen. And I will turn it over quickly to Kaylee for a moment to talk about some ground rules before we get into the presentation. Kaylee.
Yeah, so Jeff mentioned that we're going to ask everyone to hold their questions and comments until after the presentation. And because there's such a large group tonight and we want to be respectful of everybody's time, we're going to limit your questions to 2 minutes at least until we get through everyone getting a chance to ask a question or make a comment once, and then we can, if we have more time, we can go back to folks who have a second or a third question or even more. And then after that, we're going to end at 7. And if there are still some questions or comments that we haven't gotten to, we will definitely record those if you put them in the chat or if you email Jeff, and we will compile all of those and provide some answers and responses and send that out to the group after the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Kaylee. And we'll jump right into this. I think I'll probably go over things for maybe 20 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into questions after that. But general overview, what I'd like to cover with everyone tonight is just a little bit of background on how the Philbrook Farms subdivision is set up, a little bit about the stormwater design, particularly on Tract D that we're here to talk about specifically tonight, so folks have an idea of how that works, some of the current issues that we're seeing with the system and how we're currently managing it. We've been doing some investigatory work and monitoring, so we'll talk about what we've learned over the last couple of winters, about how the system is operating. And then I want to talk a little bit about our near-term plans and some longer-term considerations for where we might like some input from you all and how to handle the situation going forward. So first off, a little bit of background. You can see just a quick map there, kind of locating Philbrook Farms on the map. We are out in kind of the Orchards area, kind of almost up, or Salmon Creek area, I'm sorry, and we're almost up to by WSU Vancouver, just off to the northwest of our subdivision there. So Philbrook Farms is a unique type of development. It's not a standard subdivision. It's called a planned unit development, which is it's a form of development that has been developed to allow additional flexibility and some creative site planning. And that's something that the county adopted many years ago to provide for a variety of lot sizes, a variety of housing styles, gives the developers a little bit more freedom to kind of meet needs of the community. And there are a few things that go along with the development that is a PUD or planned unit development. Along with that design flexibility, there's a few requirements that are also added on. And one of those is having to do with open space. And so in places like Philbrook, there's a minimum of 12% of open space needed in the final development to make sure that there's recreational amenities and things of that nature, both active and passive. The important take home for our discussion is that stormwater facilities under the Planned Unit Development Code can be counted as part of those recreational areas as long as they remain unfenced and are open to the public for access. So that's important to our discussion because we do have that situation at Philbrook. So Track D, along with most of the other parts of the development, was completed in early 2017. As mentioned, it's a dual use area. So what we've got on Track D, as well as tracks A, B, and C at other parts of the development, is we have an underground storm system that is completely below ground. All you can see is occasional lids and pieces of evidence that there might be something down there. And then above ground, we've got recreational facilities. And so that's all part of that planned unit development agreement. What that also means is that we have split responsibilities for how we take care of the site. So the stormwater is, let me back up really quick. The actual tract is owned by the county. So the county owns Tract D, and the county owns and operates all of the stormwater infrastructure that's below the surface. We're responsible for taking care of it, we're cleaning it, fixing it, all of those things. The HOA, on the other hand, is responsible for taking care of and dealing with all of the surface amenities. So the basketball courts and the picnic tables and the playground equipment, those types of things are HOA responsibility. That's the same situation for all four of the stormwater facilities in Philbrook. So there's Track A and B, which are the ones that are on either side of the main drag coming in from 50th when you come in the main entrance to the subdivision. And then Track C is over there on close to 60th and 133rd or so. All four of those are intended to remain open to the residents as open space and recreational areas. So secondly, I want to talk a little bit more about that stormwater design because it's really easy to see the recreational amenities when you go down to Track D, but you don't see much of the stormwater design. So this shot here shows an overlay of the stormwater infrastructure that's in and around Tract D. And you can see kind of where the layout is with the recreational stuff in the photo. If you notice all the bright green lines running down the streets, and you might be able to see my cursor moving, I'll kind of trace a little bit. We have stormwater pipes out in the street. They are gathering water from all of the streets, all of the roofs, all of the driveways for a good portion of Philbrook Farms, several blocks that go up there. That water runs down and is collected in these green pipes down to the bottom end of the subdivision, and then they head west. And when they get to this point here, they cross over and go into the Track D stormwater facility. And this piece right here where my cursor is at the very south end is a treatment vault. Within that vault are 70 large filters. All of the water that comes off of the roads goes through those filters and is treated to state standards and then moved down into the facility to the part of the facility that's the infiltration basin, which is in the middle here. So water comes into these two manholes, is spread apart, and flows into underground chambers that are 5-foot tall tunnels, essentially, of pipe that fill up with water. They're held there, and then the water is dissipating and soaking into the ground below the facility. Some folks might have noticed these little green lines behind some of the houses on the north and the east of the facility. So those are backyard drains, yard drains. Those come into the facility down past and are not included in the treatment part of the facility. That's okay. That is actually not considered polluted water by the state. So that's not roof runoff or anything like that. It's just drainage from the yard. So that water comes in and is added. It's a fairly small amount, but you have all of that treated water going into the facility. So I wanted to show you just a quick little look at what you would see if you opened up that treatment vault. This is two different views of it. If you were to open up the vault and look straight down, you would see a bunch of kind of circles, and that's the top of the filters. In the one at Philbrook, you would see 35 of those circles, and they're actually stacked too deep. So there's 70 filters in that large vault. If you looked at it from the side, it looks like a whole bunch of, this is only showing one stack, but it would be 2 stacks deep. But essentially it looks a little bit like an oil filter that goes in your car, and kind of works the same way almost. The water is pulled in, it is siphoned down through, and there's a media within those cartridges that cleans the water before it goes into the infiltration gallery. The infiltration gallery, the little figure up on the top here is just kind of another side view, kind of shows you what you would see if you were down in the gallery looking down a pipe. So that's a 5-foot tall pipe, and it's about 10 feet wide. There's 9 of those, and they're a couple hundred feet long, running all the way out under the basketball court, as you could see in that previous slide. So I've tried to mark up a little bit. There's a bunch of lines on this particular figure, but I wanted to again show you a little bit how this thing is supposed to stack up. And so I've tried in my shaky freehand to draw some colored lines, and I'll just sort of walk you through this. And of course, if there's questions afterwards, we can pop back to these slides that are a little more detailed and walk through them some more. But at the very bottom, this thick, dark blue line is the groundwater elevation. And that groundwater elevation out there is about 200 feet, about 198 feet of elevation. The importance here is that there's at least 5 feet of separation between our treatment chamber, and these 2 light blue lines are the area that should be filled with water when we have our infiltration gallery full during a storm. So we get water between 205 and 210 feet of elevation. And then way up above here, where this green line is, that is the ground surface. So that's where the basketball court is, and the playground equipment, all of those things are at this level, which is 217 feet. So 7 feet above the top of that infiltration gallery. The last line, the red line, is the depth of water that you would expect to see on the top of the ground and over the basketball court and all of the amenities if we had what's called a 100-year flood. Now, a 100-year flood is a rain event that has a 1 in 100 chance in a given year of occurring. It's that much rain that you would expect to only see it once every 100 years or so. A 10-year event, by comparison, is a rain event with an amount of rain that you would expect to see once every 10 years or so. You have a 10% chance every year of seeing it. Now, those things don't mean that you can't see those multiple years in a row. You have a 10% chance every year of seeing a 10-year event, if that makes sense. So it doesn't just mean you'll never see it more than once in 100 or once in 10 years. You can see it more often, but in general, it's an expectation that we have. So you can see we definitely expect to have water. It was designed to overtop and have water stored above ground in those very large events. Somewhere between a 10 and 100-year event, we expect to see water coming up to the surface, and that's by design. Next up. So here I've just drawn a real quick figure of whereabouts that water would be when you're talking about 1.5 feet or 2 feet of water above the surface that we would want to see only when we have about a 100-year or at least a 25-year event. Okay, so you'd see some inundation in all of those areas. So as all of us are aware, that's not exactly what's happening. So what our current issue is that instead of just seeing the water come up on top of the surface in a 100-year event, or at least in an event that's bigger than a 10-year event, we're seeing multiple times per year that we get water on the surface. These are some photos I took over the last couple of seasons out there. So you can see that we definitely have a significant ponding going on. You can see that it makes quite a mess there with some in the bottom right corner where it floats all of the wood chips out of the playground equipment, and they all go to the other end and make a mess. Lower left, just for reference, the seat on that bench there is about 18 inches deep. So it's about 18 inches of water when we see it up to that point. Okay, so that's a little background on the facility, how it works, what we're seeing. So what's happened to date? So the HOA board, your HOA board, approached Clark County formally, or more formally, in June 2021 with safety concerns as well as recreational concerns. The safety concerns, of course, are of paramount importance, but related to the winter flooding of the playground and the basketball court. So it's essentially what we call an attractive nuisance out there. We've got those swings and playground equipment that are inundated at times. And there was some legitimate concern, of course, that we don't want youngsters to get out there and get themselves in any kind of harm's way. So Public Works Management, our risk department, our prosecuting attorney's office, we met a few times and determined that the way to go would be that we need to fence that facility off during the winter, just to protect against that liability and make sure folks are safe. So in the intervening time, that's the way we've been operating the facility. We've also done a fair amount of monitoring out there to try to get a handle on why it's happening, what might need to be done to fix it. We didn't want to jump the gun and try to do things that weren't going to work. We also had really no idea. We were hoping that it would be something that could be fixed with maintenance, those kinds of things. But in order to know that, you got to go in and do some upfront monitoring. So we did have groundwater monitoring done by a consultant out there from February 2022 to March 2023. And then some of our staff here in Clean Water were doing monitoring in the overflow system and also down in the infiltration chambers themselves. Those started at various times during 2022, and we're continuing to monitor there just to get additional data to keep on learning as we go. And I know everyone is aware of the temporary fencing that we're using to restrict use approximately from November to May. That's been going on 3 winters now. So we had the winter of 21, 22, 2-3, and 3-4. I know we're anxiously waiting to get that fence out of there for summer 2024. We are going to go ahead and open that up this week. So that's some good news for folks. So I think by tomorrow or certainly by Wednesday, we'll have the gates unlocked and swung back and locked open. The contractor that puts up fences and takes them down for us, maybe a couple weeks until they can get there and actually remove the fences, but the facilities there will be open for use starting in a day or two. Okay, so I want to give you a little bit of background on what we've learned. So this is just a quick map from our consultant showing where our monitoring wells were. There's one up to the north end, one down kind of on the southeast end, and then this little diamond in the center is where the overflow is, where the water comes back up out of the ground and out of the system when it does overflow to the surface. What we found, so the facility is actually compliant with the Clark County Stormwater Manual and state regulations. So as we looked at, the water there is fully treated. I know I've heard some concerns in the past that perhaps we had contaminated water over the ground there. That is not the case, thankfully. So we have fully treated water. And the water is fully infiltrating into ground. There's no off-site discharge, meaning that we are complying with the letter of the law as far as the state is concerned with the facility, which takes a little pressure off us as far as what we want to do. Secondly, the infiltration gallery does not appear to be clogged or in need of maintenance. We've been able to get some eyes on that and determine that there's really no evidence that it's broken down there or it's full of sediment or silt or anything like that. It does actually have some special rows in there that are supposed to be isolator rows to get rid of any kind of particulates that might have made it through the treatment system. But typically speaking, the treatment system's removing all of those particles that would clog the system. So what we do think is happening is groundwater mounding is occurring. And groundwater mounding is when a lot of water is infiltrated into the ground very, very quickly. And there's not enough time for the underlying groundwater to essentially move out of the way and make room for the new water. So that's what we're really seeing happening in this system. It builds up and it basically plugs up the bottom of the vaults there, or the infiltration site, won't allow the rain in or the water in, and so we see it backing up onto the surface. I think this next one is my really busy slide. So really quickly, I won't try to talk you through all the lines on this, but I want you to focus on just a couple of pieces of this. You can see, if you want to look back in later times, we do have the rainfall from February of 2022 up through March of 2023. These are data sets from both our internal monitoring and our consultant. So we're watching groundwater levels, we're watching levels within the overflow, and we're watching levels within the base of the chambers themselves. But what I really want to have you notice here is this top line, this blue line across the top, and where it's kind of covered up by this pink line, there is still a blue line underneath there. What that's showing is every time the water level backed up out of the system and over onto the surface, right? So every time this blue line pops up off of the baseline, which was the 0 point, that means the water came backwards out of the system. We had too much, couldn't get to the ground, and that's when we have flooding up on the top. So you can see that in the 2022 spring period, we had 5 or 6 of those events. As we went into 2022 and 3 winter, we had 5 or 6 before March. So it's consistently happening, and that's about how often. So what are the take-homes from that? Groundwater levels are generally stable out there, and they are at the expected depth that we thought we would find them based on what the developer found before they built the development and what we had hoped to see based on the plan sets. So groundwater looks to be where it needs to be. That mounding is significant, and it is probably even more pronounced than what we see through our data, because the data was collected off to the side of the facility, right? So right below the facility where the water is really going in, we think that water was probably quite a bit higher even than what we measured. As I mentioned, we average about 7 to 10 ponding events every year. One good thing is the surface water recedes relatively quickly after most of those events, usually 1 to 3 days, as you could kind of see in that graph, and we can go back and look at that in more detail. Okay, near-term plan. We want to increase public access back to the property. It's been 3 winters that we've been doing this seasonal fencing. It's a bummer of a situation, and we'd really like to move away from that. We're currently excluding access, on the order of 200 days per year. There's really only ponding out there maybe 20 or 30 days a year. That's not insignificant, but it's a lot less than 200. So what we'd like to be doing here by this fall is install a permanent fencing solution, but provide controlled access with auto-closing person gates at both ends. This would allow us to change the way we manage the site, allow year-round access for users at their discretion. It would be a code key access or a card, probably a code key. Main benefit here is, of course, maintaining the protection against young children gaining access, right? We don't want the youngsters out there unattended or without someone knowing about it. We will also make this ADA compliant, so we would want to add a little bit of paving to make sure that we can situate those gates at a location where folks can put strollers in or wheelchairs or whatever, what have you, so you don't have to go across the grass to get to the path. We think that'll be $50,000 to $75,000 to get that done. I'm hoping closer to 50, and we intend to be able to do that by November of 2024. So with any luck, we've seen the last of having the facility closed through the winter. And then, I lost there we go. Okay, and then long term, the goal there, of course, is to improve the performance of the system. We want to reduce or eliminate that flooding that we're seeing, or that backwatering and ponding. We have basically 3 options that we've been looking at. Number 1 would be to expand the infiltration gallery. Essentially, that means we'd go down and dig another big hole down there, 15 feet down, and we would try to expand those underground pipe systems by putting a whole bunch more of those 5-foot tall, long, hollow pipes in there to store additional water. Kind of a similar thing, instead of digging down and expanding the gallery, we could bring in fill and we could raise the ground elevation over the entire park by several feet using gravel, coarse material that has a lot of storage space, a lot of pore space. And then we would just store that water in the ground, replace topsoil, replace everything on the top, and just essentially have all of those amenities several feet higher in elevation. Thirdly, we could go back up the system into those pipes that I showed you right off the bat coming down the streets, and we can take a shot at trying to take a little pressure off the system by putting in some treatment and some infiltration pipes under the streets and see if we can get rid of some of that water enough to keep it from flooding over as often. So those are really the 3 things that we can do or that we we'll be exploring doing as far as fixing the system per se. The other thing I've added here is that surface drainage on Track D is poor. I know I've been out there with some of the folks from the HOA over the years, and it really remains soggy after you get a rainstorm or after we have irrigation out there. The way it was built is not great. The drainage patterns are not, they're not handy as far as getting water to the drains. So whether or not we end up in there with an infiltration fix, there is potential to improve the surface drainage on the property, either with or without that fix. So that's not quite as expensive of an operation, but I do put it there as a possible action that we could take in the future. Now, those three first bullets likely cost $500,000 or more for any one of those. And of course, that includes replacing all of the surface amenities that the county would put back in place after we go in and tear up the whole place. That kind of stuff we would be looking at installing probably in 2027. There's a couple of years of engineering and work that needs to take place to do those larger projects. Okay, last slide. What do we need from you going forward? We really want your feedback on the long-term options, particularly how important are those things to you? Do you think, you know, that this is super high? Is it, yeah, it's okay if we can at least get in during the year? We'd like to hear kind of what you think about the management of the site going forward. And also just to realize that those long-term fixes are quite expensive. And because we are in compliance with our stormwater permit, that means that those fixes are dependent on county council approval. So we will be taking those requests and those needs up to our council to make sure that we have a budget allocated to do so. So it's really important and really helpful if we know from you what you're looking for and how important it is to you, so we can take those messages upstairs as well. I think I will stop there. I didn't make 20 minutes, but it was pretty close. All right. And I'll turn it over to Haley to kind of set us up for questions.
All right. So please feel free to raise your virtual hand and we can unmute you to ask your question, or please feel free to send your question in the chat and Jeff will read them and answer.
Here. All the way up. Okay. So I'm just kind of scooting down where there's questions in the chat. The first one that's a question, comments, I guess I won't necessarily be responding to. We'll just kind of log those. Feel free to make them, but if there's a question, I will get to those. Paul Chamberlain, I think, is the first. So I'll read the question. Is there any known issues in nearby neighborhood homes where groundwater has raised above the surface in areas such as backyards or on home crawl spaces? I ask as there is standing water in my crawl space at the same intervals of heavy rain. Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's a great question. I'm only aware of one, and maybe you're the one, that there is some water in a crawl space at a home that's just north and to the east, or sorry, to the west end of the facility on Track D there. Oh, I see you waving. That must be you then, sir. Yep, okay. I know we talked a little bit in the past about that, and we were trying to figure out if it was something that was coming from within the property, or something happening on property, or if it was actually backing up so far from the facility that it was causing problems. I don't know that we ever found the full answer on that, sir. So maybe something we should spin around on, and maybe we can get some folks back out to take a closer look if it's still happening. Okay. Yeah, let's make sure we check in and get in contact after this, and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for bringing it up. Okay, so that's Thompson. Yeah. So here's one from Chris. How would access work over the next few years with the gate? Great question. So we want to make it secure, but we want to make it so folks can get in there when they want to. So the county, for some of our facilities, we use like a punch key, like a code, right? It's like a mechanical lock that you just punch 2486, opens it up. We want to have automatic closures on these gates so that we can make sure they're not just left ajar accidentally. And then we'll also have some sort of a push bar on the inside. We don't want people getting locked inside either. So what I think we would do is the Philbrook Farms HOA is really the keeper of the recreational amenities. They would be the keeper, I believe, of the code and could distribute it to folks both in Philbrook and also in the neighboring. I know we've got some folks maybe here from Pleasant Hollow off there to the west who like to use the facility. So that would be at the HOA's discretion, I think. But my thought would be it's likely that that they would grant those codes, and then folks could just kind of come and go as they please. And that wouldn't, we would just leave it at the user's discretion, right? We're not going to come out and say, nope, you can't go in. We may put some signage up and say, you know, it's not recommended to go in when there's water on the surface. But if someone wants to go out there and they've got the code and they're not a small child, they can do it. Hopefully that helps with your question. We can follow up more if it doesn't. And then I've got one from Connie. Is that right? Hi, Connie. I've worked with Connie a little bit as one of the board members, so we get to talk about this more than some of the rest of you and I. So thanks for the question. Connie says, by when would you like to receive community comments? That is also a great question. We would like them immediately and for as long as you care to keep giving them. What I'd like is to be bringing some thoughts to council and, you know, working on things like budget and those type of deals by the early part of next year, if we could. But I would say for comments and just letting us know which kind of solutions resonate most with you all. If we could get comments in the next, you know, month or two, that would be terrific. Sooner the better. Just gives us more time to kind of wrestle with the information and make some progress. That's not that great of an answer, Connie, but hopefully that helps. Okay. That's a comment. Okay, here's a couple part question from Janice Bueller. Hi, Janice. I know we've met as well. Also a member of the HOA board. So a multiple part question, how will a proposed solution for repairs meet the following? Number one, the open space requirements in Clark County Code, that's 4052.080. That's the planning and development code that I was kind of talking about way back at the beginning for others. All PUDs shall provide a minimum of 12% open space based on the net site area for passive or recreational purposes. Stormwater facilities may be counted as open space only if they are not fenced, and they include features such as natural areas, water gardens, and habitat, and are incorporated into the overall space design. So by having that access available, we meet that open space standard. So we've had a few chats with our legal folks about that question. Like, can we have a gated access and it's still open space? Answer yes, according to the legal folks here. That makes sense to me as well. And that's also one of the reasons we just don't like this system that we have right now, where we're just completely having people not able to access. That to me is a little bit over the top as far as, you know, trying to meet that open space requirement. So I think on number one, we're good, Janice. Number two, Philbrook Farms HOA desired outcomes. Oh, this is more of a comment, I think. Oh no, yeah, how will it repairs meet the following? Philbrook Farms HOA desired outcomes of park availability, including the equipment, 100% of the time, not seasonally, and HOA asset preservation rather than continuing damage. Great questions. Okay, so on part A of that, park availability, including the equipment, 100% of the time, not seasonally. We won't be able to say 100% of the time with the interim solution of the fence, right? That's that kind of, right now we're at 200 days a year where we're not utilizing the system, but it's really only flooding for 20 or 30 days. So by going with the fencing option and the code key access, we're increasing the use of that, not to 100%, but all year at your discretion And then, of course, you're not going to be playing ball out there too much on those 20 or 30 days when it's flooding, but way better than what we have now, we think. Asset preservation. So I've heard this one in the past, and folks have been concerned with, if we continue to let it overtop, particularly in the case of the asphalt surface on the basketball court, right? Continuing inundation will eventually degrade that surface. It will start crumbling. And it could also have some impacts on some of the footings and things like that on some of the wooden structures over there on the playground equipment, right? So the way the plat map or the plat recording for responsibilities at Philbrook works is that if the HOA does something up on the surface that damages the county's underground facilities, that's on the HOA, right? It doesn't state so much the other way around. However, if we do go forward with a management system at this location that, say, isn't a huge fix, right? We don't spend $500,000 to put additional storage underneath, and the HOA is fine with having access most of the time, but not all the time, then maybe the county is just going to go ahead and periodically replace those amenities, right? It's the stormwater system that's backing up, causing the damage on the top, just like if HOA did something up top to damage what's underneath. If the county system damages the top, that's not going to be on the HOA. I don't have the details of how all that stuff would work, but essentially, we try to be better neighbors than that. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. Mike Judo, sorry, not sure which way. If you are really worried about liability, how robust will the fencing be? People are defeating the current fence you have now. Yes, they are. Someone even took their kid down there to play in the water. Yeah, that's a an ongoing concern, right? If somebody wants into something, they're going to get in. And at the end of the day, right, we will put a pretty robust fence, certainly more robust than what's out there now. Those temporary fences are kind of flimsy and they're just kind of held up with those concrete blocks. This will be an actual fence that's anchored all the way along, much more secure than the fence we have now. Can it be defeated? Absolutely. Can it be defeated by a 2-year-old? No, right? Can someone bring their 2-year-old in and let them play in the water? They absolutely could. But then it's their responsibility. It's their choice. We don't have that problem of someone just wandering in unattended, right? So that's really what we're trying to get at when it comes to that safety aspect. Hopefully that helps. What would the gate, from Thompson, what would the gate system look like? Nice wrought iron or ugly chain link? Probably ugly chain link. That's the typical fencing that the county uses, although it's not just a straight galvanized, right? If you drive around the county, you've got numerous examples. It's a black vinyl coated chain link fence. I think there's some discussion to be had whether that fence would need to be a full 6 feet tall, or maybe get away with a 4-foot fence. We do that in some places, so something to be discussed. Probably not wrought iron though. We have lots and lots of questions. Thank you. Lindsay Fowler says, why would it make any sense to create a recreational area where it's also intended for drainage? Yeah, that's a great question and a challenging one, kind of. The short answer, Lindsay, is that it was looked at as an efficient way to utilize space, right? So in the traditional stormwater management sense, you might have a big pond out there that's got a big fence around it, and that's where the stormwater goes to get managed. And that's it. There's no amenities there. There's no recreational use. There's just kind of wasted space in people's minds sometimes, right? So the idea of these planning and developments and the idea of these shared facilities was that maybe we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone and have this this system that provides our stormwater treatment, but also get some benefit for the community out of it. So That's the good side of it. The negative side of it is when we have things like this happen, it just kind of complicates things a little bit more, right? And makes it a little bit bigger of a problem. We can't just slap a fence around there and let nobody in, because the planned unit development rules are that it needs to be open, because that's why they were allowed to build that development, because there was that park area there. So we can't just close it off. Hope that helps. Okay. From Dana and Sue, could the gate code be set to inoperable during times of ponding? I don't know the answer to that. I think it might depend on the type of system we used. If we went with an electronically controlled system where there's a battery, like a lithium battery pack, we might be able to go in and control that. I don't know if like a mechanical system would do it, and we haven't really decided yet, but that's a really good question, because we could possibly just remotely, I think what you're suggesting is remotely just lock it up so that we have that extra level of security when it's ponding. That's a good thing to think about. Thank you. Tom and Lynn Peavy, how long would the bigger options take to complete without any park access? The actual construction period to do any of those options, well, the two that are in the park, well, and the ones that's up in the roadway. So it's an impact and it's a disruption to do a project of that size. What I would guess is that it's probably a one summer operation. So typically these kind of things, right? The groundwater is not that far down below. We have to do these kinds of projects in the summertime when it's dry. So we're not down in the water and making a huge mess. So probably this type of a project, if we were going to dig down in there or build it up, would be taking place between June and October of a summer, during which time the park would be entirely unusable. It would be a construction zone. There would be heavy equipment, large trucks, lots of noise, like a standard construction site. So there is that caveat to to those big fixes. There is that need to do a big construction project that does have impacts. Let's see. Oh, this is Janice's second, so I need to skip to the first one for someone else. And that's also Janice. And that's a comment. Okay, that's the last. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So there are a couple of folks that have additional questions. I need to go back up though and find that. I think it's Janice, these two. Okay. Okay, so Janice, a follow-up question from you. How do you explain the fencing as being compliant with Clark County Code for open space? What part of fenced in is compliant with code? Yeah, my understanding is it's because of the gate access, right? If the fence was there and there was no way in, that would be fenced in. When there's an open access port, there's a fence, but it's not fenced in. I'm not sure how to best explain that or better explain that. That might be something we can follow up, Janice, after, I know you've got my contact info. Oh, and I skipped one. Okay. So thanks, Janice. And I'll jump to your next one here, but I'm going to jump back to Tom and Lynn Peavy. Which option did you say would also include helping the soggy drainage issues? Any of those long-term options, right? Or none of them. I think that the sogginess on the surface is really a completely separate issue that stems primarily from the grading that was done on the surface when it was built. So what we've got out there is drainage grates that are elevated above the ground, and they're not at the low point. So the water goes to the low point, but there's no drain there, and it just sits there and is squishy and soggy. And that happens regardless of the flooding events from the system underneath. That happens just when it rains or when it's, when we irrigate, right? When we water it out there. So I've been out there all times of the year when it's pretty squishy, which is kind of a mess, right? So addressing that, clearly we would do that automatically with either of those two large options, right? If we dig up the place or if we fill in the place to get more storage, we're going to have the opportunity to completely regrade and redo the surface. So we would automatically do that stuff. I added in as an also thing because we could come in and work on those kinds of issues with the HOA, even if we don't do the big fix, okay? And work on some regrading and work on making that system work better the way it was designed to do on the top. Hopefully that helps. Jumping back to Janice. This is fun, all over the place. Janice says, why is there a 3-year delay from 2024 to 2027 to fix the problem? Several reasons. One, engineered projects take a lot of time. We are, you're looking at a significant amount of time to do modeling, to do calculations, to do the drainage design, the engineered design to make sure that the thing works. We need to know we have the right capacity. We need to know we have enough room. We don't want to break ground on something that isn't going to be enough. So we need to decide what kind of a design we need. That's one thing. The budget part is another one. As we talked about a little bit earlier, this is not a required fix under our permit. Clean Water Division is very, very driven by complying with our state municipal stormwater permit. So most of our effort, most of our money has to go towards meeting those requirements. That is not to say that things like this are not important. It's just to say that we have to hit those requirements. And this is also another thing to do. So we have to feather them in. We have to ask for the money. We have to front load that. And then it takes a long time for things like contracting and actually making the work happen. It's the world of construction, and it's kind of a big deal. It does take some time. It's frustrating, and I know that's where that question's coming from, Janice. It is super frustrating, and all I could promise is that we will try to, if we go this route, we'll try to keep things moving as fast as we can because we're wanting to get it fixed too. Okay, other extra questions? Okay. Yeah, is it Robert McMahon? Or bear with us a second. Yes, yep, got that one. Okay, so moving down. Robert McMahon had a question. Is the county prepared to reimburse the HOA for lack of use if the big option is chosen? And I'm guessing that would be for that summer period that we would need to shut everything down to do the project. I'm just guessing. No, there's no mechanism to reimburse in a monetary fashion. We would come in, we would do the work as fast as we can. We'd get out, we put things back together so folks can go in and use the facilities some more. But it's not a thing that it's a reimbursable type of situation. And then from Connie, has the county ever considered taking over Part D at 100%? For example, removing the HOA's easement, either having the HOA remove the assets or the county keep them and the county mow the lawn, etc., and maybe eventually convert it to a vegetation that has no issues with the occasional flooding. That's a great question. Unfortunately, the answer is no. The PUD code has language that allows a public agency to agree to take over these types of amenities from a planned unit development HOA. The limiting factor here is that kind of what I was saying before. So the Clean Water Division, we are a stormwater program, and we are restricted by code and policy to spend our dollars on stormwater management, not on managing parks or recreational amenities. So it's very difficult for us to free up dollars to take over something like that and do it. Conversely, these little recreational amenities are not county parks. They're not owned by the county as a park. They're not on the budget for our county parks division. So those folks have no money and no authority to be taking care of, say, Track D and the amenities there as a county park. So it's the trick is that there's nowhere to go for that oversight and that management outside of the HOA without some mechanism that I'm not aware of and would have to be developed. It's a great question and maybe something to talk about more in the future. But right now, I'm not aware of a mechanism that would be able to allow us to do that. Right? Thanks, Connie. Here we go. Daryl, is that? Yep, that's a question. Question from Daryl. Do you do soil core samples and compare those to the developer's report? There is soggy ground with irrigation in some areas, and that would indicate soils that don't drain well. Great question. So part of the work that we contracted with a geomorphologist firm to do when they did the groundwater monitoring for us, they also took core samples as they were drilling those for exactly that reason. That's really good you pointed out, because we were concerned that maybe things were a little different than what we saw in the reports that went into the development. So good or bad, what we did find was very, very similar. We found no huge differences between what the developer found when they did their cores or their groundwater monitoring and what we found when we went in to kind of confirm all that. So you are right. The soggy ground is, that's like fill dirt, right? So that's not really the native soil profile that's down below. That's controlling the infiltration rate. So the infiltration we're getting from the system is, 10 or 15 feet below the surface at the bottom of that big gallery, which is a very different set of soil conditions than up at the top where they were bringing in the soil to make the park. I hope that makes sense, but good observation for sure. Tom and Lynn, am I on the right track here still, Haley? Yep. Who do we give our comments or votes to? Who do we give our comments or votes to make these decisions? I would start with me right off the bat. Please ping me on my email, which I think is out there. And then we also have the website. Let me know what you're thinking. We will likely be trying to compile thoughts and opinions as we move forward. And I will, of course, share those also with Haley and Kaylee, who are our primary public involvement folks. Okay. Oh, and Steve S. had kind of the same question. Hopefully that helped. And maybe I don't know if we put that up at the end again and show the contact. Well, yeah, at the end of this, we'll put the contact info back up and you can jot it down. Paul Chamberlain. What if the HOA dissolves? Who would then be responsible for the park? You might have stumped me, Paul. That one I think we'll have to get back with you on. I'm not too sure how it might actually just revert to all of the individual homeowners, right? Even in the absence of an organized group. But I can't say that for sure. Let's take that one down and we'll get back to you. Let's see. Oh, and I see Haley's putting some stuff in the chat there as far as some contact information as well. So that's my phone and email.
We will go for 5 more minutes. So it looks like we have 2 more questions that have come in, and we'll try to get through as many additional questions in the last 5 minutes as we can.
Perfect. We can get to more if I wasn't so rambly, everybody. Hopefully some of these answers are making some sense. I appreciate your patience. Dana and Sue, why do you think the excessive ponding issues were not anticipated in the original construction development? That is an awesome question. Lots of really good questions, everybody. So It's a hard one to answer. Back when the development was approved, county staff at that time, in community development department, different department than ours here with Clean Water and Public Works, but community development reviews plans for developments and makes sure that they appear to be meeting the stormwater requirements and many other requirements to put a constructed project on the ground. I do know that concerns were raised by review staff because there was gray area around how the water would be dealt with. When those questions come up, there's something called a hearings examiner hearing, and developer states their case, their data, their reason for this being the way they're planning the process. County staff will occasionally raise concerns. The hearings examiner will weigh those out and come up with a decision. In this case, the hearings examiner went forward and said, we believe this is going to be workable. As I was saying before, all of the proper steps were taken by the developer as far as we can tell. Doesn't look like there was cut corners. So if we're looking for blame placing, I don't think we're in a position to really do that. Certainly I'm not here to do that. Oftentimes it's just things happen, right? Groundwater is a really tricky thing. It's very hard to predict what it's going to do. It's very hard to predict how it's going to act. So we take the best shot we can. The engineers do, the developers do, the county does. And sometimes things just don't work quite like people hope. That's probably kind of a cop-out answer for you there, but hopefully that helps a little bit, Dana and Sue. Daryl, for option 3, do you know what street would be used for additional capacity? I don't. That depends largely on how deep the system is below the ground. We have to be very careful about the grade, right? We need to have enough slope. We need to have enough depth in order to put those kinds of systems in the ground. So my guess is that we would try to do it on the east-west streets rather than, say, the north-south street there on, say, 57th. We probably want to go laterally because, one, there's not as much water in each spot. So we can kind of get it at the source instead of when there's already a whole bunch. It's harder to manage once there's a lot. So my guess would be kind of on the lateral streets, but until we get a chance to really look at it, I don't have a good answer for you. Tom and Lynn, how many gates will there be? One on either side of the park. Yes, one on either side. So we'll have a person gate up on the northeast corner at that entrance, and that'll line up with the path up at that end. And we'll have another one down on the south side, on the southwest corner there. There will be only one equipment access gate, and that'll be on the south end. So when the county needs to come in and do maintenance, we'll come in at the south end. When the HOA's landscaping service comes in, they will come in at the south end. And of course, we'll continue doing what we've always done with a dual lock so that the maintenance folks can get in and do their work as well. All right. Okay. I don't know if there's some closing words from either Kaylee or Haley, but I will just take a quick moment again to thank everybody for your time. Really pleased to see so many folks here. Really good questions. And we'll put the contacts back up here really quick. Look forward to talking some more. I know there's a few commentaries out there that we weren't able to get to, but I've got those on hand. We'll try to get back with you about those questions and comments and concerns. And have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much for joining.